What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Gotta Get Back, the Samurai Jack and Review Show. Welcome to episode 59, guys. My name is Kyle, your host. Welcome to Project Potter. If you haven't seen the show before, guys, this is the Samurai Jack and Review. We're doing a recap of every episode, a favorite character, a favorite scene, score out of 10, and some trivia. So we're going to kick it off here, guys, with only 3 episodes to go after this. This is the beginning of episode 59, and we see Jack in his original attire, not the bearded Jack that we know for season 5. We see Jack in his gi and his sword, and he's walking up, and there's just something about this season 5 Jack that just is a little off to me. Like, I don't know if it's like his face or he looks too happy. It's kind of weird. I don't know. The end. I understand that they had to update the animation style, but there's just something just a little bit off. So I'm just like, it just doesn't look right. But nonetheless, like the side shots are fine. It's just like the straight on shots in the face. I don't know, something about it. But they're like these 3 little rams that are following Jack, and they're really cute. And he's like, "Excuse me, would you happen to know if there's a time portal at the top of this mountain?" And he's like, "Of course you don't know." He's like, "What am I thinking?" And so he's walking up there, and he gets to the top of the mountain. And the ram like leads him over, and there's a time portal. But this one, instead of being like on the side, it's like in the ground or at the top. And Jack is like, and he gets excited and he runs and he jumps in and he actually gets in the time portal. We see him kind of going through, and then we see Aku reach in and pull him out. And he's like, "Whoa!" He's like, "That was a close one." He's like, "You thought I was gonna let you get away with it, huh?" And Jack is pissed off, and he starts running back towards the time portal, and Aku destroys it with his eyes, and he's like, "Oh, Samurai, you're so foolish." He's like, "Oh, fun fact." He's like, "That was the last known time portal in existence." And Jack is really angry now. And it's like, wow, dude. So we don't know how Aku knows that, but he knows a lot of shit. So I'm sure he figured it out. And so Jack is hunched over, and he's really, really angry, and he's like shaking. And Aku is like, "Whoa, Samurai." He's like, "Be careful." He's like, "All that stress and you're going to have a heart attack." And he's like, "Wait, what am I thinking?" He's like, "Continue, please." And so it's funny because then Jack gets angry and he starts yelling at Aku and just chasing after him with the sword. And then Aku is like backing up, and he's like, "Whoa, I know better than to get close to that thing." And Aku's just always toying with Jack. And he's like, "You know what? I'm going to head out." But he's like, "I'm going to leave you with 3 friends." And he like does some magic, and these 3 little rams, these little cute little rams, they turn into like these giant beasts. And then Jack goes over and he's going to take down these giant, like they're like bulls now. And this episode is very much like the mature rating, because Jack goes over and there's a lot of blood on each of these. It's like shows his sword like going deep into the bulls. So he takes down one and it's bleeding everywhere. Another one jumps at him. He stabs it in the head, and it goes deep into the head, and it's bleeding, and it falls into the pit that Aku just made from destroying the time portal. And then he kind of jumps off of a couple of pillars and then kills the last one. But as he kills it, it transforms back into that cute little ram, and it's like now bleeding out the head and it's dead. So Jack like can't believe it, and he's like, "Oh no, what have I done?" And he drops the sword, and the sword like rolls over to the edge of the pit. And then like a pillar falls and it shakes the ground, and then Jack is like, "Oh my God, no." And he goes over and he reaches for it, and the sword falls into the abyss. And he's like, we cut back to current Jack, and he's like, "And I could not find the sword." He's like, "That's how I lost it." And he looks ashamed, but he's riding this big like bird creature with Ashi, and they're actually going back to that spot. So they find the huge tower, and it's cool because they descend down, because Jack is like, "We got to find my sword." And they go all the way down there, and Ashi and Jack are looking around, and they have like a torch there, and they're looking all around, and it's a cool little scene. And there's like a great shot where it's like the bird, and then Ashi on one side, Jack on the other side, and they both have the torches, and you could always see like what's around them. They can't find it, and Jack is like, "It's not down here." What he does see is the skull of the little ram that he killed, because it's been 50 years now, so it's just the skull left, and Jack is like feeling ashamed and sorry for his actions. But he goes around, he's like, "It's not here." He's like, "I understand now that," he's like, "I did not lose the sword, but the sword left me." And I was like, "Oh, this is really cool." And so he says, "Thank you" to the bird, and then Ashi says, "Yes, thank you." And then it like gives Ashi a little pet, and she like feels the warmth and it flies away. It's nice, but they're like building a bond, and Ashi is now getting like much better. So Jack is like, "I don't know how long this will take," but he's like, "I need to do this on my own." And she's like, "No, I'll come with you." And he's like, "No, you cannot." And then Jack goes over to the edge of the cliff and he just sits down and then he like meditates, like the scene here behind me. And Ashi's like, oh, okay. She's like, I'll just wait then. And she sits over by the edge of the cliff. And then Jack goes into like this meditative state where he goes on like basically a whole nother plane. But Ashi is actually looking and there's a whole big army coming to take down Jack. And so she sees that and she gets like the Jack eyes and it's the half panel. And she's like going to defend him at all costs. But before that happens, we get this scene behind me where it's really cool. It shows Jack in the center frame and it's like the stars are going by and it's spinning and it's like all these different colors, and Jack ends up going to like this huge green grassy field. There's like tranquil music playing. It's really nice. He like steps across these stones and he gets on this little like wooden raft with just a stick and he pushes himself kind of into the sun through some like dark clouds. And then it's like this little like samurai hut. It almost looks like the hut where he met the samurai. And there's like a monk there and he shows up and he's like, please, or he says, are you lost? And he goes, yes. And he's like, all right, well, come on in and we'll make some tea. So meanwhile, while Jack is off on like his spiritual plane, like trying to get his mojo back and his sword back, Ashi needs to defend his physical body. So there's a huge army and she's like, what is your purpose here? They're like, we've come to kill the samurai. What's it to you? She's like, no, you're not going to do that. And this is a huge army, like hundreds or thousands of people. And she's like, I'm going to stop you. They all start laughing. And she's like, I'm serious. And he's like, you're going to stop us. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, all right, then. And she's like, come on, I'm waiting. And then Ashi goes through and she takes the leader and she like pushes all of them off the cliff. And so like a bunch of them fall that way. They fall into spikes. There's a lot of blood again. Ashi jumps down. She starts just beating everyone. There's spears at them. And she just takes the spears and like turns around and throws them back at the guys. And these are like going right into their heads and they're bleeding. And again, very graphic. But Ashi's like screaming. So she's going full rage mode. And we know Ashi's very well trained as a fighter. So then it's funny because the contrasting parts where it's like Ashi going like crazy. And then it cuts to really quiet scene where Jack is literally like on the floor and he's got all these different like instruments. It looks like they're made out of wood. And he's like carefully folding the napkin and he's carefully doing this and he's making tea. And he goes through this process of like pouring the water in and taking the spoon and holding the spoon up and like being very calm and kind of recentering himself. And there's like this nice tea there and he pushed something in there, like crushes it up. I don't know the ingredients for tea. I'm not a tea drinker, but meanwhile, while this is happening, Ashi is taking down everyone, but there's one archer that gets back through to the top and Ashi realizes that. So she calls on the bird. She does like a whistle and the bird brings her up and she's like worried that she's not going to get there in time. And they fire the arrow at Jack's body and Ashi gets there at the last moment, grabs the arrow. And then she's like, okay, cool. And then like 12 arrows come up out of the sky and Ashi thinks on her feet and she takes a piece of the pillar, holds it up to defend Jack. So they like go in there and they miss around him. It's really cool. But then we find out that is the high priestess that is there. And she's like, mother. And she's like, I know you would betray us. She's like, you were always the weakest one. And Ashi is like, she can't believe it. And she's got to defend Jack. And she's like, here, you can make it up. She hands her like a black dagger. She's like, kill the samurai. And she's like, no. She's like, I will not. She's like, Jack showed me the truth. She's like, you were wrong about everything. And she's like, no, the samurai is our mortal enemy. We must kill him. And she's like, no, I cannot. She's like, you were wrong. And they're like, fine, then I will kill you myself or whatever, or I'll do it myself. And so then we get this awesome showdown of the high priestess versus Ashi. And high priestess has like this cloak on and she just drops it. And she's like, let's go, baby. And Ashi grabs one of the horns of one of the old dead rams as like a dagger. And they're fighting and they're kind of going at it. There's a great part where like the high priestess like lunges at Jack and she's like about to stab him and Ashi pulls her back so she can't get him. They like go on the pillar and they're like stabbing through the pillar. So obviously like they're pretty well trained, but there's this awesome dialogue too where she says like, he killed your sisters. And she's like, no, you killed our sisters. She's like, our fate was decided the second we were born. And I was like, wow, dude. This is dark. This is really, really cool. The high priestess is like just about to take down Jack, where she like throws Ashi underneath some rubble. and she can't get there in time. And she's like about to go kill Jack, and she jumps up. And what does Ashi do? Well, she takes an arrow that's stuck in the ground and she throws it, and it goes right through the high priestess as she's jumping for Jack, and it pretty much kills her on impact, and she goes over the cliff. And that's how she takes down Jack. Meanwhile, Jack is still talking to the monk, and he's like, "Here, try this tea." And the monk sips the tea, and he's like, "This is terrible." He's like, "All of the ingredients are here, but," he's like, "you're missing the most important part." He's like, "You're missing the balance." And then Jack is like, "What?" He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Show me how to make it balanced." And he's like, "I cannot show you." And he's like, "What do you mean you cannot show me?" And then this is where we get Mad Jack. And we saw Mad Jack in the season beginning, but he was like blue. He was angry, but he was blue. So he was like kind of like steamed, but not, he was like lukewarm Jack. And this is full on rage Jack now. So there's a cool shot because that's Jack sitting there, the monk on the other side, and then like we see Jack, Mad Jack, like manifest itself, and he's pure red, and he's raging, he's shaking, and he's yelling, and he's like, "I've kept you alive all this time." He's like, "How dare you?" And Jack is like, "No, I see now that you have blinded me." He's like, you have blinded us and like gotten in the way of our goal." So he's been blinded by hate and rage, and he's like, "You are not welcome here anymore." And he's like, "What? No, you need me." And Jack gets like this golden like look in his eyes, and he just like banishes Mad Jack, so he gets rid of his demons. And then it's cool because he goes into like the outer space area, and then he goes to the same place where his father went when he got the magic sword, to the three gods. I think there were four though last time, I don't remember, but they're like, "You, just like your father, you are worthy." And they shoot him with like the golden light or whatever, and it looks like it hurts him for a second, but they rebuild his original gi, and his hair's up, and cuts his beard and all that. And then they reforge the magic sword, and the sword comes down, although they didn't see them like ironing it or like forging it or whatever. So it wasn't, I would have liked a little bit more there, but the sword comes down and it shows Jack's eyes, and we could have gotten the iconic Samurai Jack eyes, but he didn't do that. So I thought that was weird. But he gets the sword, and he's like, good to go now. He sheathes the sword, and it's like Jack is back. But again, it looks a little off. It just looks a little bit different, and I don't know what it is exactly, but it just doesn't quite look right for me. But he comes back now. Ashi's passed out on the ground, and Jack like turns around, and he's like immediately worried. He runs over. He's like, "Ashi," and he shakes her, or he doesn't shake her, but he holds her. And then she wakes up, and she's like, "Jack," and he's like, "Yeah, it's me." And she's like, "Oh, you look a little different." And she's like, "I guess you got shaved your beard and all that." And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, and you got your sword back." And she's like so happy for him. And he's like, "Yeah, I did." And he's like, "And I see you've been busy." And it cuts to like all the dead soldiers. And there's one guy that's like, "Ow." And she's like, "Yeah, I guess so." And he's like, "Thank you." And then she's like, "Okay, what's next?" And he goes, "Aku." And that is how the episode ends. Okay, guys, the magic sword for this one, it's Ashi. I mean, Ashi takes out literally an entire army. It's really sweet how she is willing to put her life on the line to save Jack. And there's obviously like a love for him now, as she, not only does she get to kind of bury her old demons by like facing the high priestess, and like her mother showing up and her being like, "No, you were wrong." And then she's like, "No, the samurai is the enemy." And she's like, "No, he's not." And she's like, not only she has to kill her own mother to save Jack, who, to be honest, she doesn't know very well, but she has seen enough of his actions where she's like, "Yo, this my man." So yeah, it's great. She's awesome. She's super badass. I love that she is so powerful, even without, she doesn't have like her scythe anymore with the chain. So I was like, oh, she doesn't have like any weapons, because she got rid of that when she moved on from being a daughter of a coup. And so it's cool because she takes out the whole army with just like her fist, basically, and her sheer will and determination. And it's really awesome. So Ashi kicks ass, and she's my magic sword for this week. The portal on time, guys, for this week, it has to be when Jack is making the tea. It's so cool the way he sits down, even though he still had Mad Jack in him at that point. How he like realizes that he needs to sit down and take a minute and relax and get back to his roots. And we see like past episodes, we see like flashbacks to when his mother was like teaching him how to make these hats here, and like how he was just calm, and how he's just been so driven by rage. And even in the opening scene where he ends up killing those 3 little lambs, and how he's so angry at Aku, and he's been trying to get back this whole time. And yes, Aku is part of that, but Jack realizes that he needs to center himself because he's not doing it for the right reasons. And yeah, he lets the anger blind him, but he gets his mojo back. And that one scene where he's making the tea and he's got the instruments and he holds the spoon up, and just that whole process I thought was really, really calming and nice. And like, it's the simple things that gets the sword back. So Jack kind of clears his mind, and that one scene I think is my portal in time for this week. Okay, guys, for a score for this one, this was a strong episode. I'm going to give it a 9.3. I just really like the fact that not only does Ashi have to take down her demons and like kind of bury her past, but also Jack has to bury his rage there. So it's funny because one is going from rage to calm and one is going from calm to rage. So they're kind of balancing each other out there. But they're both going against like the previous things that were holding them back and kind of getting this clarity. I like that they're doing that. I love that Ashi is defending Jack's life, like no matter what the cost, even if it means killing her own mother. So that's awesome. I love the fact that we see Jack like officially banish Mad Jack, and like, you know, the thoughts where he was like telling him, like leading him to suicide, and telling him that like, you know, like it's useless, there's no hope. But Jack is like, you know what, dude, there is hope. He's like, I lost sight of that, and he's like, I'm going to get my sword back, and we're going to do this thing. And but he's like, I've been way too blinded by hate and rage. So he's like, get rid of that. And the fight scenes were really cool. But I love just the spiritual sequence that Jack went on and the journey he goes on while he's all sitting there. And it's so cool that like they're so close to taking him down a couple times, and then Ashi against all odds saves him. So just a strong episode. And if it wasn't for like the slight animation with Jack, that I just find kind of unsettling, I would have given it maybe a higher score, but the point was there, and all in all, just a good episode. Okay, guys, Jack facts for this week. As I mentioned, Jack regains his katana, or his sword, and his original appearance in this episode. It's also revealed at the beginning here that Jack lost his katana after dropping it near a pit where the pillar collapsed on him, causing him to fall in the pit. Later in the episode, Jack implies that the katana vanished from reality entirely after his rage made him unworthy of wielding it, similar to like Thor's hammer. His spiritual journey allowed him to rebalance his soul, once again making him worthy of the sword. So that's cool. We get Mad Jack here for the final time, which is cool. The High Priestess is also killed by Ashi. While her corpse is never shown, it can be assumed that if she wasn't killed by the arrow that Ashi threw, she either died from massive blood loss or the impact of the fall, which was what ultimately killed her. Yeah, dude, that was a huge cliff. She would have definitely died from that. And the High Priestess's face is never seen. So that's interesting. We never know who she is, but I kind of like it that way. It's mysterious. It says here, you know, confirmed by the High Priestess, the other 6 daughters of Aku are confirmed to be dead. 100% knew that already. We saw Jack kill them. I mean, there's no way. It would have been weird if they survived that. So it's kind of nice to confirm that, but also, like, of course they were dead. This episode also features the most on-screen confirmed kills, with several thousand of the green humanoid army brutally slaughtered by Ashi. Except for that one guy that's like, ow, but he probably would have bled out after. So I like that the show is taking a more realistic, dark approach in the final season there, instead of like, you know, Cartoon Network where they were like, oh, they were knocked unconscious. It's like, or they were just killing robots. This one's like, no, these are humans or creatures. And it's like, yeah, they're being murdered. So I just like that it's a good tonal shift. Of course, this is the episode that mirrors the gods restoring Jack and the sword, similar to when his father needed it. So this is something I did not pick up on. So it was also revealed that the gods kept the katana for the period of 5 decades after Jack lost it. So he lost it like right at the beginning, and then 50 years went on where he couldn't get the sword. And like he said, the sword left him. So yeah, he was kind of walking around with that rage for 50 years, and he wasn't fighting the right way, and he needed to rebalance his soul so he can get the sword back. So yeah, he hasn't had a sword for so long. And even though he was still taking out enemies with guns and bikes and stuff, he wasn't doing it the right way. So it's really nice that he kind of got his soul balanced, and that's really cool that the gods held on to that. This is also the first time that Jack says Ashi's name out loud in this episode, so I didn't realize that, but that's a nice little touch there. And then the ending scene where Ashi wakes up and sees Jack and compliments his new haircut and shave mirrors the previous episode where Jack compliments Ashi's new hair and dress. This seems to be, since the previous episode represents Ashi's change, while this represents Jack's change. So, like I said, they're both getting makeovers there. So the orc army leader also says, we're going to rip you apart into little pieces and then take those pieces and rip them apart into even more pieces. Apparently, this is a throwback to Gordo and Jack of the Smackback when he's in the Dome of Doom, who said, "I'm going to tear you into little shreds, and I'm going to take those shreds and tear them into little shreds." So that was a nice little throwback there. This is also the last episode in the 5th season, which is the series, to feature red blood. The next episode involves green alien blood, and the final 2 episodes are bloodless. So interesting. I like the red blood because it added a little like brutality to it, but apparently they didn't want to do too much of that. Also, it's possible here that the monk is Rama. Rama is like one of the gods there, mostly because they both have a tilaka on their forehead. Don't know what that is, but the monk is a Buddhist. Buddhism was favored by Gautama Buddha, one of Vishnu's avatars. Hope this makes more sense to you guys. It does to me. Jack's spiritual test involved a tea ceremony. Both Japanese and Indian cultures have their own tea ceremony. Rama is the only one of the 3 gods that Jack has not yet met or interacted with. So that probably would match up there. And then, of course, it says here, guys, the reason Jack gave up so soon 2 episodes ago is because he thought he had killed the brainwashed children, which stems from him killing the lamb 50 years ago without realizing he could have found a way to save them from Aku's corruption, believing that he had committed the same mistake again, which, of course, Ashi says, like, no, you saved them. So she tells him that. And then Ashi's fight with the Orc army is almost a perfect mirroring to the battle Mace Windu had in Gendy's Clone Wars animated miniseries, right down to the decimating the army with her fists. So that's all good. There's a couple goofs here, guys, to wrap up the Jack facts. After Ashi defeats the army, she's shown drenched in blood. However, after she sees someone on the mountain trying to reach Jack to kill him, she is shown with no blood on her, which is a good point. I did not remember that, or did not realize that, really. And during the fight between Ashi and her mother, the mouth of the High Priestess mask moves like a real mouth would during some fight scenes, which is funny because obviously that is a mask. So with that being said, guys, those are the slew of Jack facts we have for this week. Okay, guys, that's it. That's another episode. We only have 3 more to go now, guys. So 60, 61, and 62 remain. I'm excited to wrap this up here, guys, but Jack has got a sword back. Him and Ashi are out to take a coup down. It's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of plays out there. I remember most of it, but we'll recap it, of course. Thanks for checking out Project Potter, guys. Thanks for checking out Gotta Get Back. Go check out the other content on the channel, of course. Like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell notification. And until next time, guys, gotta get back.